now AIs are almost being trained to be good friends, you know? Like an AI is probably more likely to tell you the things you want to hear than another real human being. That's a little bit worrying in the sense that it's going to be easier to be friends with an AI than a real person, because being a good friend is actually an investment.
It's hard and long work, and it's really fragile.
Yeah, exactly. What we a lot of times say is that if you have that opportunity to meet a friend in real life, put your phone down and go do that. Don't mess with retro. Don't do anything. Just meet a real person in real life. There's no substitute for that.
안녕하세요. 최성운의 사고실험입니다. 오늘도 정말 특별한 게스트분을 모셨습니다. 제가 대학생 때 이제 경영학과 IT를 전공하고 가장 관심을 많이 가졌던 제품 그리고 산업 분야가 Sns라고 부르는 소셜 네트워크 서비스였는데요. 오늘은 인스타그램에서 스토리라는 기능을 기획하고 개발해서 출시한 제품 디렉터이자 또 지금은 인스타그램을 떠나서 가장 아름답고 완벽한 소셜 네트워크를 만들기 위해 노력하고 있는 레트로의 네이선 샤프 창업자를 모시고 인터뷰를 진행해 보도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 대화 에서 위대한 제품은 어떻게 만들어지는가, 또 그리고 이 네이선 샤프 창업자가 생각하는 소셜 서비스의 본질은 무엇인가, 어떻게 보면 정말 사고 실험스러운 그런 대화를 나눌 수 있는 시간이 되길 기대하고 있습니다. 그러면 시작해 보겠습니다. Let me introduce you, Nathan Sharp, co-founder and CEO of Retro.
Yes, well, so excited to be here.
Thank you for waiting my, crappy intro part. Could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name is Nathan Sharp. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Retro, a new social app that is designed like a weekly photo journal that keeps you close with friends. Instead of different apps that have become all about entertainment, it's an app where you just see family and friends. You just post the photos that you've really loved from the last week, and the only people that can see them are those family and friends.
It sounds like really a private space, and it strengthened the bond between our intimate people.
That's exactly right. We saw as everything was going toward more public, algorithmic, attention-grabbing content, we wanted to build a place that felt really safe and private and intimate, that you feel comfortable with everybody who's going to see their photos. Very low pressure and sharing to a group of people that you trust.
So as I explained to our audience that you worked in Instagram as a product director, and is it your major interest to how people interact or how people connected?
Yeah. I mean, I think my overarching interest is how we as humans can use new technologies that we developed to get us closer to the goals that we have. One of the goals that I'm most excited about is how technology can make people feel closer when they're far apart, but also how to feel closer when you're in the same city or in the same school, that type of thing. And so Stories was about giving a window into the lives of the people you care about. And Retro is very much a follow-up to that.
So you found your mission using technology to make people's life better, and one point is that people feel closer to each other. Why is it important for you? Like, I heard that you majored politics and philosophy and economics in Harvard University, so is that the time that you found the mission of your life there?
Well, what is interesting is when I look back at my life and the things that I was interested in, I do see a through line. Even before I was in college, I was really interested in architecture. I was just intuitively drawn to it, didn't know exactly why I was into it. And then as I grew older, I got really into politics and policy. And so it's not like in college I was thinking about building mobile phone applications, but I was thinking about how you can build things that create kind of structures and incentivize certain behaviors that bring out the best in people. If you look at architecture, it's really about how you can build a building or a college campus so that you create the interactions between people that bring out the best. And when you think about policy, I think the thing that was always exciting to me about policy was that you could create these kind of rules and regulations that create the constraints for people to live their lives. It can go really well, or it can go really poorly. And so something is at stake there. Then you want to be involved in that. You want to influence that. And I guess as I started to explore different careers and where I could have the most impact, there was this turning point when in 2007, I'd taken an internship at Google. And the thing that really struck me while I was at Google was that, first of all, Larry and Sergey were having so much more global impact than any of the politicians or diplomats that I looked up to. That they were creating a wonderful and new way for people to work together, that I said to myself, I think that this is more exciting to me than architecture or policy, that I just want to work with amazing people to create new companies in the future.
After the internship in Google, so you started your career as a product manager, and what exactly that your academic background helps you to be a better product maker?
Well, I'll say one thing that when you think about, and especially philosophy, it causes you to ask this question of why.
Why? Yeah, sure.
And oddly enough, it's more rare than you would think in startups or technology startups where you can measure almost everything. So you usually have a lot of data on what is going on in your app or what's going on in the industry. And you could kind of lose sight of why are we doing this thing in the first place? And so I think what philosophy gave me, or thinking about and wrestling with philosophical questions, allowed me to bring to some of the work that I've done is this question of why. So why at the highest level? Why even start a company at all? Why would somebody use our app? But also at the lowest level, which is why should we spend our precious time on this feature versus that feature? It helps clarify things a lot for yourself and all of your coworkers in terms of investing their precious time.
And you moved to Instagram like in 2016?
Yeah.
I don't mean to be rude. But
yeah.
But I saw your LinkedIn, and when you joined to Instagram, you're not a renowned product maker at the time.
Yeah.
So I was curious, like, oh, this guy really literally changed the whole destiny of Instagram. But at the time, you're just a young, ambitious person. And why did Instagram make them to do this really important project? What did they see in you?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing to mention is that it was a team. And just because my title was product manager, and so it wasn't like Nathan Sharp joined and everything just changed. Well, what I would say is that whenever I joined, what they saw in me was that I was going to be a strong junior product manager with potential. The project itself wasn't considered a super important or like highly strategic project at that point. Immediately when I landed at Instagram, I found myself faced with a pretty interesting problem, which was that there was a product problem. The pressure to post something on Instagram was getting higher and higher.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah. And if you remember what Instagram looked like in 2016, it was still a chronological feed. You were still posting next to like National Geographic or Selena Gomez. So you kind of had this feeling of like, if I'm going to post, it better be good because it's going to hit the feed between these people and they're going to see that Selena Gomez has thousands of likes and my poor post got like 26 likes. I'm embarrassing myself. Anyway, that was one problem. And product problems, every product has things it can improve on. So that's not surprising. But the other thing was that the team had been working on a lot of different projects before I joined, like independent apps or features that were meant to reclaim casual sharing. And a lot of those hadn't worked out. And so the team itself was a little bit low morale. And so I think a challenge there was trying to find people that still had a real excitement and risk tolerance and wanted to take a risk on building like a new and bold feature. And that's actually how I met my co-founder for Retro, is that I was on the team and it was a pretty small team and we were trying to pull together some of the best people, some of the best product thinkers. And somebody had said, this guy, Ryan Olsen, he's amazing on iOS. Like, there's no way you're going to get him on your team, but you'd be so lucky if he joined. And there was like a happy hour or something on campus and he was there. And I remember meeting him for the first time and being like, man, it'd be great if we could work together on this project at Instagram. He ended up kind of being excited about the team and the project. And so he joined. It wasn't called Instagram Stories at that time. It was called Kodachrome. That was the internal code name for it. And the rest was really just history. It was really small. I think for a long time, it was like 6.5 people, half there because we had to borrow time from a server-side engineer because the project was kind of considered a bit of an experimental thing.
Yeah.
I think that there were people inside of Instagram worried that creating a separate production and consumption surface in addition to the feed would actually backfire and hurt feed sharing.
Yeah.
So people would share to feed less. There'd be less ads seen on feed, so it would hurt revenue. We might just be causing this like downward spiral for the app. And so nobody at the company at that time thought that this was going to develop into the thing that more people shared to than even Instagram's feed.
You know, I have a bunch of questions to ask about that decision because as an Instagram user for 10 years, I exactly remember the time when Story came out. And so there are a bunch of questions.
Sure.
At first, you said you and your small team, everyone is a great product thinker. What do you think that great product thinker has kind of ability?
Well, I think when it comes down to it, a product is really just a solution to a problem. So to be a great product thinker, it just means that you have a deep sense and understanding of the problem for a user. You understand a user's psychology, a user's environment, a user's habits, and that you can intuit what the solution might be, even when the user can't articulate what the solution might be. that you have enough of experience to know what's possible and enough of an imagination to anticipate something that hasn't been built yet. And you can do that at the highest level, and you can take that all the way down to like the smallest like feature button design.
So do you think intuition, imagination are essential? Like, I mean, to me, it's kind of one-way door decision to put it in the feed in Instagram, which means the burden of the decision is getting really high.
Yeah.
How did you know that you're doing the right thing?
It's a great question. As we got the project up and going, even in the time that we were building it, we realized that this was a really, really important problem for Instagram to solve. So the founders, Kevin and Mikey, got deeply involved. And there was a period where we were meeting together for like multiple hours a day, just hashing out what the project would end up like. And so it's really to the credit of Kevin and Mikey that they were so bold with the feature. It's also notable that most features inside of major apps like Instagram are tested really rigorously among kind of a smaller group of people before they're rolled out to everybody. But Kevin and Mikey saw that this feature was so important to the future of sharing on Instagram that they actually supported us rolling it out to 99% of the world in one day. So it wasn't really a test, it was just rolled out to everybody. That was an amazing call on their part.
Yeah.
That was the right call, and it's really kind of to their credit that they as founders could be so bold with their own creation. The other thing to say is that it was a single door project, like you mentioned, that there wasn't really any going back, that we committed to it. We even decided to call the product Stories, like acknowledging that Snapchat was the pioneer in creating that format, and that this was now a format that not just Instagram was going to ship, but we expected a lot of other apps to ship it. But we did do some smart things, I think, in terms of making it feel a little bit more two-door. Namely, one of the things we did is there was this Stories tray at the top of Instagram's feed, and it's the most prominent real estate across all of Instagram, of course. But we went ahead and just assumed that for some people that the product is kind of a failure. What would happen if it failed? How do we make sure that a failed product isn't just this banner advertising that we've shipped a failed product at the top of Instagram, one of the world's most popular apps? So what we did is that the tray itself, it only shows a few profile circles. So if only like 3 or 4 people in your network had shared a story, it still looked like a full tray.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't full, if you had no stories available to you, if you hadn't shared one yourself, the tray just collapsed. And so it kind of disappeared, and you could hit a caret and you could expand it again. But
kind of toggle thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think that was really useful. Luckily, the product was pretty successful from the get-go. So that state didn't really show up for a lot of people, but we felt more confident shipping it to so many people because we knew that it wouldn't bother folks that didn't have any stories in their network.
I think the art of that decision is that you don't made another tab for it, like Stories tab, but you integrate the whole features within the main feed. And so you have 2 ways of time. Like at the top, there's a Stories and it flows to the horizontal way, and the post, their time flows in the vertical way. And of course, it's a little bit more complicated, but to me, it feels more interesting and there is something more to explore. So I think that's why I love about that.
Yeah. It's glad that you feel that way now. I think that there was, as we were shipping that, it was a pretty novel thing to put the tray at the top like that. The idea was that this was a very different type of content. This couldn't just be another type of feed format that felt more casual, because putting an ephemeral format, something that disappeared in 24 hours, next to content that was permanent on your profile in the feed, just felt like it was kind of mixing 2 things, and that the users that were excited about a low pressure space wouldn't really get the point. You would still kind of be compared to whatever was in the feed. So we needed to create a new space. And it was a space that would have its own sharing flywheel, meaning that whenever you shared something, people need to see it so that they could respond to it. So you had some sort of feedback and incentive to share something again. You needed to see other people posting so that you can get a sense of how other people are using the space. A lot of times we talk about social surfaces like they're a dance floor. You don't want to be the first person out. You want to know how to dance. If there's professional dancers out there, you don't really want to go out and dance with them either. So you needed to get that flywheel going. And so among all those things, we just thought that the bold real estate at the top in a separate space communicated the message that this was something new and different, and it was prominent enough where people would see others using it and hopefully jump in and use it themselves.
So how was your feeling after that you launched those Stories? I guess it really, outweigh your expectations. Yeah. What did that experience left you?
I mean, I think one, it just kind of left me, and I think other people on the team, with a bit of a sense of awe. You can work really hard on something inside of a big app like Instagram and ship. Your hard work that nobody knew about a day before can be used by millions of people that next day. Obviously, you can look at dashboards and see metrics and see that something's successful or not successful. But I think the moment it struck us was when you would see somebody in the real world using your product. It kind of became culturally significant that you would start to see in the news. I think on SNL, I remember the first time there was like a mention of, I saw it on their Instagram story and thought, wow, this is amazing. I think it kind of spoils you a little bit, especially if you're a person that had come from startups or that will go into startups. It spoils you big time to work on an app with so many users like Instagram and ship something and have millions of people use it the next day. It's such a different experience in a startup where you're more or less fighting for every single new user and every single spot in the app store. It's just a very different game.
But that experience not just spoiled you, but I guess that you gain some kind of self-conviction.
Yeah, and part of it, earlier you asked like how did we as a team, how did Kevin and Mikey have the conviction to go out to 99%? I think one of the really important lessons from that is that you do need to trust your intuition and you see something and you know it's good, you feel it's good for you, you see that people whose taste you trust like it, you should go with that. One of the things with Instagram stories is that it was actually our favorite period of the entire product process right before we launched, when the product was really mature and you just saw all of these employees that you had been working with day in, day out on this thing. And you knew a lot about their work life and who they were at work, but you had no idea who they were at home. And you saw their story show up in the tray. You tap in and suddenly you have, like I said, a window into their lives. Like you see that this person lives just down the street from you, or this person Ryan Olsen was like super into rock climbing. And I'd kind of known that, but I'd never seen that footage. He's like an Olympian level rock climber. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And so it started doing its job and you just had this feeling, you had this spidey sense that it was going to be really successful for other people because it worked so naturally for you and your friends.
Yeah, and that's one of the advantages of social media, I guess, because not everyone can have that experience that they become native customer of their own product.
Right.
It's a privilege, I guess.
Totally. Yeah. And honestly, that period right before stories is what informed and nudged us to do Retro as the first product for Lone Palm Labs. We remembered what it felt like to have something where it was just your family and friends. It didn't have any of the noise or distraction or rabbit holes that social media has kind of evolved into having. We wanted that again. We wanted that for ourselves. We wanted that for our own family and friends. It's really nice whenever you can build a product where you represent one of the core users because you can just build for yourself in the beginning.
So you finally left Instagram and started your own company. Yeah, this question might be also offensive, but I don't really intend that.
Go for it.
Yeah. To me, the Retro is at the far end of stories. Isn't it also feels confusional or denying what you have done?
It's, somebody recently wrote about us and was kind of talking about the fact that we'd worked on and launched Instagram stories, and that's a very dopamine driven product.
Yeah.
And now we've launched Retro, which is kind of anti-dopamine. And so I think that's funny. They called it a 180. I think in some ways that's true, but also it's just the way that things have evolved. Around like 2018 as TikTok started picking up and showing people that a For You feed of content that's completely unconnected to you, coming from people that you've never followed or knew in real life. That was kind of the ultimate way to serve people the most engaging, attention-grabbing, attention-holding content. And so Instagram itself, in order to adapt in that and evolve in that ecosystem, has become much more about entertainment. There was recently like a slide shared that about 93% of time spent on Instagram is now on content that comes from people. The problem we wanted to solve was that we saw that a lot of those people that had posted in the past like that weren't posting anymore. Even though there is growth in private sharing on chat groups and that type of thing, it's fundamentally a different type of content from just your kind of broadcast low pressure update. For example, on Retro, I'll share photos of my kids every single day of the week almost. There's not a single group chat where I'm just like dropping photos of my kids every single day, not even to my mom. I don't there's something very different about putting a photo into a feed and allowing people to come and see that if they want to and sending it to them directly in a chat thread where you feel this obligation to respond. And that it's going to be really hard for Instagram to retrieve that in the app as it is today, because for me at least, it feels almost like posting my kids' photos or like home videos on Netflix. The type of content is just, it's like oil and water now for me. And so we think that there's other people like us, and we think that the people that Retro resonates with right now are like us in that sense, where they wanted something different.
Yeah, so I understood. It's not that you changed your kind of whole interest or self-denying or what you have done before, but the whole ecosystem of the social media has changed. The ways of consuming streaming and generating contents have been changed really dramatically in just 3 or 4 years. So within TikTok and Reels and kind of that. So
Yeah, exactly.
as you said, in Instagram, people now consume 90% of contents made by the people who they don't know. And that's why they're making revenues.
Yeah.
Because you can put ads there. You can make people to behave more in dopamine-like way.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people ask you so how could you expand? How could you grow? Does it scale? If there's just a small private community, so how can you make more, interactions? And what do you think about this kind of arguments? Yeah.
Well, I think that there's two questions of scale. There's one which is, can you scale to users at a significant level? And then there's another around the business model, which is, can you scale to profit at a significant level? The first one is like, can we get to a scale of lots of different people? And usually what that comes down to is whether or not you have a use case that a lot of people have. What we found is that there's been many social networks, like Facebook is an example, where they started off with this friend use case. I want to see people that I either know directly or that I could know and that exist on the campus next to me. And we asked ourselves, how big is this use case? For the average person, is there a group of friends that they would like to know more about, like know what's happening in their lives? And would they like those friends to know what is happening in theirs? The average person's like, yeah, definitely. And so when you think about that, you're like, if we can serve that use case well enough, let's set aside like any other question. It's just that if you can just nail that use case, that's a really universal use case. And it's not even about trends, like there's so many different trends on entertainment, social media. TikTok forever ago was like kind of lip singing and dancing, and you really don't see that anymore. That's a trend that's kind of gone. But whenever it comes to friends and family content, there's no trends. You just want to see what they're doing.
It's evergreen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, it's a massive use case. And if we do our job well enough, we want to be an app that reaches 1 billion users. We think that 1 billion people feel that problem.
What you said is that even though that Retro is targeting just 1 or 2 use cases, it's big enough.
Yeah.
So it can cover the billions of people. But there's a question to me that, is it really evergreen needs? Because nowadays, I saw many friends of mine or people around me talking to GPT.
Yeah.
They feel really intimate with them. So I was in kind of uncertain, state that, is that really the future of human interaction? It's really universal trend that people interact with AI more and less with humans. What do you think about this big paradigm shift of human interaction in your perspective?
Well, I think there's the question of how this impacts retro or our thinking about retro in the future. Then there's the question of like, independent of retro, what do I think about this trend of interaction with AIs? When I think about retro, it comes back to something we talked about a little bit earlier, where you can spend your precious time on Earth doing anything. You could waste it, spend it on things that really aren't opinionated or doesn't really contribute to anything that you think is worthwhile. Or you can try and usher in a vision of the future that you think is worthwhile that maybe no one else will do. I don't think there's any sort of inevitable future. I think the future that will come is the future that enough like strong, courageous, talented people usher in and build. That was like one of the lessons from like Steve Jobs. The whole world around you has been manufactured and built by people that are no smarter than you. And so stand up and build that thing. Have the courage to develop the vision, have the courage to go after it. And so for me, I want to build products that err on the side of real human beings interacting with each other. It's funny because like whenever even you think about retro, you're like, even interacting with the photos or videos of your friends is nothing compared to going out and just meeting a friend at a coffee shop or like meeting your friends at the pub or something like that. What we a lot of times say is that, first of all, if you have that opportunity to meet a friend in real life, put your phone down and go do that. Don't mess with retro. Don't do anything. Just meet a real person in real life. There's no substitute for that. And you won't feel as fulfilled with anything else outside of that. So the second is that the thing that we're seeing right now with AIs and people turning to AIs for companionship and that type of thing, I think has a lot to do with what has happened to social interactions in the world. The funny thing is that it's actually kind of hard to keep friends. it's hard to go out, even just like what I said, to go to the park or go to the pub or go to the coffee shop. You got to get up and brush your teeth and take a shower. You got to think about what you want to talk about. When you get there, you got to be polite and funny and engaging. And all those things are kind of hard to do. And sometimes it is easier to just stay in your pajamas and doom scroll, or stay in your pajamas and play a video game. And so as it's become easier and more entertaining to just stay glued to your phone screen or stay glued to your computer screen or your TV screen, I think you see a lot of people interacting less. And so you have this pretty like depressing situation where we are today, where most people don't have close friends. Now AIs are almost being trained to be good friends, you know? Like an AI is probably more likely to tell you the things you want to hear than another real human being. That's a little bit worrying in the sense that it's going to be easier to be friends with an AI than a real person, because being a good friend is actually an investment. It's hard work.
Yeah, it's hard and long work. And it's really fragile.
Yeah, exactly.
So in general, you think that easiest thing can spoil people. So, and really good things require some hardship and time, like a good friendship.
A good friendship, a good romantic relationship, being a good parent, being a good son, you know, all these things, they're hard. It takes like deliberate thought, deliberate action to do any of those well.
Yeah, and the last question, like within every methodologies or social trends, whatever, we can't deny that every great products emerge from the great human understanding through all of your career. What do you understand about humans? What did you find about humans?
Man, that's a big question. I've got to think about that. There is one insight that informs this question. It has a little bit to do with the role of AI in retro. There have been different times where we say, what is the role of AI in the retro app itself? Or we'll have people on the outside say, or what's your AI strategy? A funny thing that when you think about what makes a photo meaningful that you see on social media, if it's coming from a person that you don't know, the content itself is entertaining or informative. But a photo from a friend, if it's just a photo of their like coffee or something like that, that's not entertaining, that's not informative. But it's interesting and meaningful to you because that human being made a choice to share that out as a moment that they thought was representative of something they want to remember. It would be very different if you had received a photo from somebody that an AI had chosen to capture and send to you from that person's glasses. So I think the insight there is that actually like AI is going to like create breakthroughs where incremental intelligence dramatically improves something. But when it comes to meaning in the memories that friends and family want to share, they have meaning because there was a very human choice, not an AI or automatic driven choice there. So that's something I think we've come to understand about at least this use case of friend sharing and how it's different from entertainment sharing.
So people prefer more human things that AI cannot mimic, or you know, can you say it in a little more detail? Like,
sure. Well, I think that AI is going to allow the average person to do so much more easily. And what that means is that a lot of things that a person can produce are going to become more abundant, but oftentimes meaning comes from scarcity. As an example, if you received a letter from your friend, but you knew that they had an executive assistant that wrote that whole letter in their own handwriting, and they had very little role in writing the contents of that letter wouldn't mean that much to you. It's kind of like AI today. If you get an email and you can kind of tell that it was written by an AI, you come to sort of like suspect or like wonder if the person behind it actually knew about it, if these are actually this person's thoughts or the AI thoughts. So AI is going to create this sense of abundance, and what is going to be most meaningful are the things that are still scarce on the other side of that abundance. One thing in terms of like human nature is that I think the things that are going to be most meaningful to people are the things where they know that there was like real human effort and time that was dedicated to it, because in the end, time is the precious resource and a scarce resource for people. And the things that are meaningful to you are going to be directly meaningful because you know that person put in real effort and real time, not an AI.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing your time.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you for having me. It's so good to talk.
Is there any last thing that you want to say to your users or your fellow product makers?
Well, I think to my fellow product makers out there, what I would say is you have such limited amount of time on Earth. And even among that time, you have even more limited periods of like high energy. And so I would just encourage everybody to think really deeply about the future that they want to see and remember their responsibility to build it, that you can't just wait for somebody else to build it because no one else will. And then to retro users and people out there, I would just say that retro was our attempt to build something that we wanted for our own family and friends, and that whenever you try it out, that's the feeling we want you to have, to feel like these people who really cared about product built something just for you and just for your friends. And so give it a try. Let us know if we're hitting that mark, and if we're not, let us know how we can.
Okay, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.